The Iron Tide. Supreme Commander Vexnar of the Draken Imperium's 7th Conquest Fleet stared at the holographic display with narrowed reptilian eyes. The human vessels, hundreds of them, had appeared from nowhere, bypassing all long-range detection systems and materializing in perfect attack formation behind his fleet. "Impossible," he hissed. "No civilization possesses such FTL precision." His tactical officer, a veteran of 12 campaigns, looked up from her station with barely concealed alarm. "Supreme Commander, these vessels don't match any known human ships in our database. They're not the diplomatic corvettes we've observed before." Vexinar's secondary heart began to pound. The human ships were smaller than his dreadnoughts but sleek and angular, with no visible propulsion systems or weapon emplacements. Their hulls seemed to absorb sensor scans rather than reflect them. "Primitive isolationists," Vexnar muttered, recalling the Intelligence Division's assessment of the humans. "Reluctant to engage in galactic affairs. Minimal military presence. Technologically unremarkable." The Admiral's ultimatum hung in the air. 2 minutes to comply or be destroyed. The arrogance was astounding. "Open a channel," Vexnar ordered. When the communication officer nodded, he drew himself to his full height. "Human Admiral, this is Supreme Commander Vexnar of the glorious Draken Imperium. Your interference in Imperial conquest is a violation of sovereign rights established by force of arms. The Lizari refused our generous terms and must face the consequences. I suggest you withdraw immediately. The Draken Imperium does not make idle threats." There was a moment of silence before Admiral Zhao responded, her voice unnervingly calm. "Neither do we, Commander. Your time is up." What happened next would be analyzed by military strategists across the galaxy for decades to come. The human vessels didn't fire conventional weapons. Instead, they simply accelerated. Hundreds of ships moving in perfect coordination, executing maneuvers that defied the known laws of inertia, their hulls glowing with a strange blue energy. "Evasive action," Vexnar bellowed, but it was too late. The human vessels passed through the Draken formation at relativistic speeds, their energy fields shearing through shields and armor like they weren't there. They didn't fire a single shot. They didn't need to. The kinetic energy and whatever field technology they employed was weapon enough. On the bridge of his flagship, Vexnar watched in horror as his fleet, the pride of the Imperium, was systematically dismantled. The humans moved with impossible precision, targeting engines, weapons, and command centers while mysteriously avoiding crew quarters where possible. "Return fire," he ordered, but the point defense systems couldn't lock onto the human ships. They moved too quickly, changed direction too abruptly. It was as if they operated under different physical laws. 15 minutes after the engagement began, 37 Draken warships had been neutralized. No ship had been completely destroyed. Instead, they drifted powerless, their weapon systems and engines precisely severed from their hulls by whatever energy the human vessels projected. In the Lizari Command Center, the Council watched in stunned silence. "They're sparing the Draken crews," Defense Director Marin whispered. "They could destroy those ships completely, but they're only neutralizing them." First Minister Talon's bioluminescent patterns pulsed with confusion. "Why?" "After what the Draken intended to do to us." On the tactical display, they watched as human vessels surrounded each disabled Draken ship, precision cutting into hull sections and extracting escape pods before the ships lost life support. The operation had the practiced efficiency of a procedure they had performed many times before. "Supreme Commander," the Draken tactical officer reported, voice trembling, "we've lost 60% of the fleet. Our remaining vessels cannot maintain formation." "The human ship's air," she faltered. "They're moving toward the flagship." Vexnar stared at the tactical display as 3 human vessels broke formation and accelerated toward his command ship, the largest human vessel, still only a quarter the size of his dreadnought, took position directly in front of the bridge viewport. For the first time, Vexnar could see one of the vessels clearly. Its hull was midnight black, absorbing light rather than reflecting it, with no visible seams or panels. It looked less like a constructed vessel and more like a solid object carved from some unknown material. "They're hailing us," the communication officer reported. 3 hours passed. The Draken fleet continued its ominous deployment. Evacuation transports loaded with children and cultural leaders prepared for desperate attempts to break through the blockade. Most would fail. High Elder, Ilara called suddenly, her voice tight with surprise. "We're receiving a response from Earth." The council chamber fell silent as the communication screen activated. A human appeared. Female, Cyrene believed, though her knowledge of human dimorphism was limited. She wore a simple dark uniform with minimal insignia, her expression calm and focused. "I am Admiral Helena Zhao of the United Earth Defense Force," the human said without preamble. "We have received your distress call and verified the situation. Help is coming. Please transmit all tactical data on Draken fleet positions and your defensive capabilities." Cyrene stared in disbelief. No diplomatic hedging, no questions about what Earth would gain, just a simple statement that help was coming. "Admiral," Cyrene managed eventually, "we are grateful, but you should understand the Draken have over 50 warships in our system, including 3 planet killers. They err." "I'm aware of standard Draken fleet composition," the Admiral interrupted, her expression unchanged. "Please transmit the requested tactical data. Our forces will arrive within 5 hours." Talon stepped forward, unable to contain himself. "That's impossible. Even with the most advanced FTL drives, the nearest human outpost is at least 2 days away." Admiral Zhao's expression remained impassive. 4 hours and 55 minutes, Minister. Please use that time to direct your civilian population to shelter in place." Zhao out. The transmission ended, leaving the Lissari leadership in stunned silence. "Could they have ships nearby that our sensors haven't detected?" Ilara asked. Marin shook his head. "Impossible. Nothing could hide from our orbital scans. The humans must be confused about the situation or—" He hesitated. "Or they're offering empty promises to comfort a dying species." "Nevertheless," Cyrene said, "prepare all tactical data for transmission. If there's even a chance they're coming, they'll need it." The next 4 hours were a blur of continued preparations, evacuation coordination, and increasingly threatening communications from the Draken commander demanding immediate and unconditional surrender. Cyrene ordered the planet's minimal defensive systems activated, knowing they would barely slow the coming onslaught. As the deadline approached, a strange calm settled over Cyrene. She had done everything possible for her people. If extinction awaited them, they would face it with dignity. 30 minutes before the Draken's ultimatum expired, the planetary sensor network erupted with alerts. Massive energy signatures detected. The sensor operator called out, voice rising in disbelief. Multiple vessels dropping out of FTL directly in system. "Draken reinforcements?" Cyrene asked, heart sinking. "No, unknown configuration. They're appearing behind the Draken fleet." The operator's voice faltered. "Hundreds of them." The tactical display updated, showing a swarm of new signatures materializing as if from nowhere. Not dozens of ships as they had desperately hoped, but hundreds. The vessels were smaller than the massive Draken dreadnoughts, but they were numerous, emerging in perfect formation. "We're being hailed," Ilara reported. It's the humans." Admiral Zhao's face appeared again, still impassive, though Cyrene thought she detected a hint of cold determination in those alien eyes. "High Elder Cyrene, this is Admiral Zhao, commanding the Earth Defensive Fleet. We have arrived as promised and are engaging the Draken forces. Please ensure all civilian population remains in shelter. This will be over soon." Before Cyrene could respond, the transmission shifted to an open channel, now broadcasting to both Lissari and Draken forces. Zhao's voice took on a harder edge. "Attention, Draken fleet. This is Admiral Helena Zhao of the United Earth Defense Force. You are engaged in the unprovoked assault of a peaceful civilization. You will power down your weapons, withdraw from this system immediately, or be destroyed. You have 2 minutes to comply. On the tactical display, the Lissari leadership watched in astonished silence as the human fleet deployed with impossible precision. The galaxy was about to learn why humanity had kept to itself for so long. Remained placid. Your attempt to exterminate a peaceful civilization was the aggression, Ambassador. Our response was proportionate and restrained. We could have destroyed your fleet entirely. Instead, we disabled it with minimal casualties. The Great Hall erupted in overlapping voices until the Jixari moderator activated the harmonic dampening field, forcing order. What humanity demonstrated was not merely advanced weaponry, said the Volhari Prime Minister, her crystalline form refracting light as she spoke. Your vessels display propulsion, energy manipulation, and tactical coordination beyond our scientific understanding. Yet you've participated in technical exchanges presenting significantly inferior technologies. We shared what we deemed appropriate at the time, Chen replied. Our policy of technological discretion has been consistent since our arrival on the galactic stage. On Elysium, High Elder Cyrene and a small delegation of Lissari leaders were escorted through the human diplomatic vessel Serenity. Unlike the warships that had saved their world, this vessel was designed for comfort and communication, with wide corridors and ambient lighting adjusted to Lissari preferences. Their guide was Captain Miguel Reyes, a compact human with dark eyes that crinkled when he smiled. Admiral Zhao sends her regrets that she couldn't be here personally, he explained. She's overseeing the defensive perimeter establishment. How many ships will remain in our system? Defense Director Marin asked. The Aegis array consists of 57 vessels and 12 autonomous defense platforms, Reyes answered. It's a standard protection package, more than sufficient to deter any reasonable threat. Cyrene noted the casual way he described a force that could apparently challenge any military in known space. Captain, forgive my directness, but we have many questions about humanity's capabilities. Reyes nodded as they entered a spacious conference room. That's why we're here. Admiral Zhao believed your people deserve answers, given the circumstances. Waiting for them was a human woman with silver-streaked black hair, wearing a simple blue uniform without insignia. She rose as they entered. High Elder Cyrene, she said with a slight bow. I'm Dr. Eliza Montero, Special Envoy from Earth's Diplomatic Corps. Thank you for coming aboard. After introductions, Dr. Montero activated a holographic display in the center of the table. It showed Earth, a blue-green world not unlike Elysium, though with more landmass. To understand humanity's position in galactic affairs, she began, you need to understand our history. Unlike most spacefaring civilizations, we didn't develop in isolation. We nearly destroyed ourselves multiple times before reaching the stars. The hologram shifted to show scenes of warfare, environmental disasters, and social upheaval, a violent history that made the Lissari delegation uncomfortable. When we finally achieved interstellar capability 70 years ago, our first encounters were unfortunate. The hologram displayed unfamiliar vessels, attacking early human ships. We discovered that several predatory species had been monitoring our development, waiting for us to emerge from our home system. The Navori Collective, Marin whispered, recognizing the angular ships. They went extinct 35 years ago. Dr. Montero nodded. After a brief but devastating conflict, yes. When we defeated them using technologies we developed in desperation, we made a critical discovery. Most galactic civilizations followed predictable technological progression paths. Humanity, forced to innovate through our fractured development and external threats, had explored alternative scientific domains. The hologram shifted again, showing complex mathematical formulas and engineering schematics. We realized we had stumbled upon technological approaches unknown to the wider galaxy, particularly in propulsion, energy manipulation, and material science. When we later joined the Galactic Concord, we made a collective decision. We would observe before revealing our full capabilities. You feared being targeted, Cyrene said, understanding dawning. Or worse, being feared, Montero corrected. History has taught us that technological disparity breeds suspicion and eventually conflict. We chose to integrate gradually, to understand the galactic community before revealing our true nature. On Concordia, the emergency session had devolved into thinly veiled accusations and demands. Admiral Zhao's face appeared on the main screen. Her expression remained as impassive as before, but her eyes held Vexenar's with uncomfortable intensity. Supreme Commander, your fleet has been neutralized. Your crews are being extracted and will be returned to Draken space unharmed. You have two options: surrender your remaining vessels and withdraw, or continue fighting and lose them all. Choose now. Vexenar's claws dug into the armrests of his command chair. Surrender was anathema to the Draken Imperium. No commander had surrendered in 800 years of conquest. But no Draken force had ever encountered anything like this. The Imperium will respond to this aggression, he hissed. We have thousands of warships, hundreds of worlds. This is merely one fleet. Admiral Zhao's expression didn't change. If the Imperium wishes to test that theory, we will oblige. But first, witness what you're threatening to bring upon yourselves. The transmission shifted to an external view. One of the smaller human vessels approached a disabled Draken cruiser. A pulse of energy emanated from the human ship, and the Draken vessel simply disintegrated. Not in an explosion, but in a controlled dissolution, the molecular bonds of its structure appearing to simply release. In seconds, a warship that had taken years to build and held a crew of 1,200 was reduced to a dispersing cloud of component atoms. That vessel was already evacuated, Zhao said as the transmission returned to her face. We can do the same to any ship, any installation, any planetary defense system in the Imperium. We have avoided galactic conflicts because we do not seek conquest, not because we feared them. She leaned slightly forward. Make your choice, Commander. But know this, the Lysari are now under Earth's protection. Any future aggression against them will be met with the full force of human response. In the silence that followed, Vexenar made the most difficult decision of his life, the first surrender in modern Draken history. We will withdraw, he said, each word tasting like poison. Within an hour, the remaining Draken vessels limped out of the system, their weapons powered down, their commanders humiliated. The human fleet maintained position, waiting until the last Draken ship had departed before reconfiguring into a defensive screen around Elysium. In the Lysari Command Center, the Council struggled to process what they had witnessed. They could have done this at any time, Ilara whispered. They've had this capability all along. A communication request came through from the human flagship. When connected, Admiral Zhao addressed High Elder Cyrene directly. The immediate threat has been neutralized. A sustainable defensive force will remain in your system for the foreseeable future. I would like to request permission to send a diplomatic delegation to discuss a formal protection agreement. Cyrene, still stunned by the events of the past hours, inclined her head. Of course, Admiral. We owe you everything. You owe us nothing, Zhao replied. We helped because we could, and because it was right. The delegation will arrive in 6 hours. There is much to discuss about humanity's role in the galaxy going forward. As the transmission ended, First Minister Talon turned to Serene, his bioluminescent patterns showing confusion and wonder. Why did they hide this power? Why isolate themselves if they could have been the dominant force in the galaxy? Cyrene stared at the tactical display where the human fleet now formed a protective constellation around Elysium. Perhaps that's exactly why they hid it, she said softly. Power of this magnitude, it changes everything. The price of protection. News of the Draken defeat spread across the galaxy at FTL speeds. Within days, the major powers of the Galactic Concord called an emergency session. Representatives from 37 species gathered in the Great Hall on Concordia. their usual political maneuvering replaced by shocked urgency. Ambassador Lauren Chen of Earth sat calmly at the human delegation's table, facing the assembled representatives. It was the first time in 40 years that humanity had sent a senior diplomat to a full Concord session. "Let us speak plainly," began Archdelegate Vox of the Kethnar sovereignty, their translucent tendrils rippling with agitation. For 4 decades, humanity has maintained a minimal presence in galactic affairs, while apparently concealing military and technological capabilities that far exceed anything known to the Concord. This deception. We have deceived no one. Ambassador Chen interrupted, her voice soft but carrying effortlessly throughout the chamber. We have simply chosen privacy. At no point did any representative of Earth claim we lacked defensive capabilities. Defensive? The Draken ambassador hissed, scales flushing with anger. Your attack on our legitimate conquest fleet was unprovoked aggression. Chen's expression, the silent guardian. The 3 moons of Elysium cast long shadows across the capital city of Harmonia as High Elder Cyrene stared at the emergency broadcast terminal. Above the planet, the massive silhouettes of Draken warships blotted out the stars. 53 vessels arranged in attack formation, their weapons charged and ready to begin the systematic destruction of the Lissari civilization. 300,000 years of history, Cyrene whispered, her 4-fingered hand tracing the ancient symbols etched into her ceremonial staff. To be extinguished because we refuse to surrender our water worlds. First Minister Talon stood beside her, his usually bright bioluminescent patterns dimmed with stress and exhaustion. The evacuation transports can save perhaps 12% of our population. The rest. He couldn't finish the sentence. The Lissari were peaceful by nature and philosophy. Their technological advancement had focused on medicine, environmental sciences, and the arts. Their defensive capabilities were minimal, designed to handle natural disasters and the occasional pirate raid, not a full-scale invasion from the Draken Imperium, the most aggressive expansionist force in the sector. We've sent appeals to every member of the Galactic Concord, said Councillor Ilara, the youngest of the Lissari High Council. Her voice carried the harmonics of desperation. The Volhari claimed treaty restrictions, the Kethnar cite resource limitations. The Jixari have offered sanctuary for our scholars and historical archives, but military intervention is beyond their scope of influence. Cyrene wasn't surprised. The Lissari's contributions to galactic society had always been cultural and scientific. They had no strategic value as military allies. In the cold calculus of interstellar politics, their extinction was regrettable but acceptable. There is one power we haven't contacted, Ilara said hesitantly. The chamber fell silent. Talon's bioluminescent patterns flashed in warning. You can't be serious, he said. The humans, Ilara confirmed. They've maintained an embassy here for 18 years. An unmanned automated outpost that merely collects cultural data, Talon countered. They've never shown any interest in military alliances or interventions. They've barely revealed anything about themselves since achieving FTL capability 40 years ago. This was true. Humanity was the great enigma of galactic society. After announcing their presence with a surprisingly advanced faster-than-light drive, they had established minimal diplomatic relations, engaged in modest trade, and revealed almost nothing about their home system, military capability, or technological development. Some species considered them primitive isolationists. Others suspected they were hiding something. All agreed they were peculiar. What do we know about their military capability? Cyrene asked. Defense Director Marin answered, his voice rasping with age. Almost nothing. They maintain a small fleet of what they call diplomatic vessels, lightly armed courier ships by all appearances. Their technology seems adequate but unexceptional. They've never participated in any conflict since joining the Galactic Concord. Then what good would contacting them do? Talon demanded. The Draken Imperium has conquered 12 systems in the past 30 years. They have planet killers and quantum disruption weapons, What could humans possibly offer except empty condolences? Cyrene stared at the tactical display, showing the Draken fleet moving into final attack position. The first bombardment would begin in 6 hours, targeting their planetary defense systems, before moving on to population centers. "We have nothing to lose," she said finally. "Ilara, prepare a transmission to the human embassy. Then send a direct appeal to their government on Earth." As Ilara worked at the communications array, Talon stepped closer to Cyrene. "We shouldn't waste our final hours on false hope," he whispered. Cyrene watched the Draken ships with a sense of fatalistic calm. "Hope is never wasted, my friend, even if it only gives our people comfort in their final moments." The message they prepared was simple and direct. No diplomatic flourishes, no formal language, just the unvarnished truth. "To the government and people of Earth, this is High Elder Cyrene of the Lissari Collective. The Draken Imperium has surrounded our homeworld with a war fleet and will begin planetary bombardment within 6 hours. Our people face extinction. All other members of the Galactic Concord have refused assistance. If humanity can help in any way, please respond immediately. This may be our final transmission." The message was sent on all available channels, broad enough that the Draken would certainly intercept it. It didn't matter. Nothing would provoke them further than the Lissari had already done by refusing to surrender their resource-rich water worlds. Humanity must disclose the full extent of its military capabilities. The Draken ambassador insisted. "The security of all Concord members depends on transparency." Ambassador Chen smiled slightly. Should the Draken Imperium like to demonstrate that principle by disclosing the location of its hidden quantum disruption platforms? Or perhaps the Volheri would care to share details of their bioweapon research facilities on Cygnus IV. The chamber fell silent. "We all have secrets," Chen continued quietly. "The difference is that humanity has used its capabilities to defend the innocent, not to conquer or threaten." The Jixari moderator's appendages fluttered thoughtfully. "What, then, does Earth want? After 40 years of minimal engagement, why reveal yourselves now?" Chen looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes and sensory organs of each delegation. "Because isolation is no longer sustainable. The Lissari incident made clear that the current balance of power encourages aggression against peaceful civilizations. Humanity can no longer stand by while species like the Draken prey upon those unable to defend themselves." She stood, her posture straight but non-threatening. "Earth formally proposes the establishment of a Galactic Protection Initiative, a defensive alliance guaranteeing the sovereignty of all participating worlds against unprovoked aggression." Back on the Serenity, Dr. Montero was explaining the same proposal to the Lissari delegation. "The choice to join would be voluntary," she explained. "Participating worlds would receive a defensive screen similar to what we've deployed here, scaled to their specific security needs. In return, they would host small Earth diplomatic and technical missions." "And the cost?" First Minister Talon asked, his bioluminescent patterns betraying his suspicion. "What does Earth gain from this arrangement?" Montero's expression softened. "Stability. Security. The ability to focus on exploration and scientific advancement rather than constant vigilance. And," she hesitated, "the opportunity to finally bring our full contributions to galactic society." She touched a control, and the hologram shifted to show technologies far beyond current Concord standards: medical systems, environmental restoration techniques, energy generation methods. "For 40 years, we've held back our most significant scientific advancements for fear of how they might be weaponized or misused. With a stable security framework, we can begin sharing innovations that could transform quality of life across known space." Cyrene studied the human carefully. "And if a world chooses not to join this initiative, then they make their choice freely," Montero replied. "We would respect their sovereignty just as we would protect those who asked for it. Earth has no interest in empire, Elder Cyrene. We've seen firsthand where that path leads." As the Lissari delegation departed the Serenity, they paused at the airlock to watch the human defense fleet in orbit around their world. The sleek vessels moved with impossible grace, their hulls reflecting the light of Elysium's 3 moons. They could have conquered the galaxy, Marin said quietly. Instead, they hid their strength until they needed to save a civilization they barely knew. Cyrene nodded, her 4-fingered hand gripping her ceremonial staff. Perhaps that's why they're worthy of trust. Power restrained speaks more than power flaunted. In the following weeks, the Galactic Concord debated Earth's proposal with unprecedented urgency. The Draken Imperium and several other expansionist powers opposed it vehemently, while smaller civilizations voiced cautious support. 3 months after the Battle of Elysium, 63 worlds had joined the Galactic Protection Initiative. The Draken Imperium, facing the collapse of its conquest-based economy, reluctantly signed non-aggression treaties with all GPI members. A new era of galactic politics had begun, one where the balance of power shifted toward cooperation rather than domination. And at the center of this transformation stood humanity, finally emerging from the shadows not as conquerors, but as guardians. On Earth, in the ancient chamber of the United Nations Security Council, Admiral Helena Zhao stood before the assembled representatives of humanity. The Lysari were just the beginning, she said, her voice echoing in the historic hall. We've shown the galaxy what humanity stands for. Now we must live up to that promise. The Secretary General nodded solemnly. A great responsibility has been placed on our shoulders, one we never sought, but cannot ignore. Outside the windows, the rebuilt skyline of New York gleamed in the setting sun, a testament to humanity's resilience after nearly destroying itself centuries earlier. Perhaps, Admiral Zhao said softly, this is why we survived our own darkness. Not just to reach the stars, but to ensure others can do the same without fear. The end.